Live from the Orion Cygnus arm of the Milky Way galaxy, this is Scientifically Speaking, a weekly half-hour program devoted to elegant curiosities, and I am one of your hosts, Sarah Chang. Joining me, as always, is Bernie Rhyme, DJ Skywatcher. How are you, Bernie?
Yes, hi Sarah, very good, thank you.
Bernie is a professor of the Astronomy Lab at USM and our local protector of the night skies. Reach out to us at WMPG Scientifically Speaking at gmail.com or on Twitter at WMPG SciSpeak. And you can go to WMPG.org to find the last 5 weeks of archives of all of your favorite shows, including this one. Bernie, could you let our listeners know what is up in the night sky for this coming week?
Okay, sure. So this Friday will be October 15th. So lots of things going on this week. First off, the moon will be waxing gibbous. And the next day, on the 16th, Saturday night, will be International Observe the Moon Day. So that usually they try to hold that after first quarter and before full. So the moon will be obvious, but there'll still be some phase on it, so you can see some of it even if you don't have a telescope. So that unites people from all over the world. Reminds people that NASA is planning a mission there within like 4 years called Artemis, which we've discussed before. I'm sure we'll do that again. And also to inspire people to keep watching the moon. So that's there. Now the days are getting quite a bit shorter. The sun doesn't rise till about 7 and already sets by 6 p.m. So the days are down to 11 hours. And then basically we do have some meteors. October 8th, the Taurid meteors peaked. And then on the 21st, the Orion meteors will peak. So we should be between the two showers. There won't be a lot of Orionids because the full moon will be on the 20th. So just a few more days for that. So Venus is still an evening planet. It sets probably by 7:30 or so. It'll be gone about an hour after sunset. But then you still have Jupiter and Saturn. Saturn comes up first, but Jupiter's brighter. They both will have ended their retrograde right around this time. So that'll be kind of neat to see that. So they're going to be going back to their normal eastward motion. And then they're going to be setting a little bit after midnight. So lots of things going on this week.
Awesome. Thanks, Bernie. Did you get a chance to catch the meteor shower this past week or last weekend?
No, I didn't actually, I try to look out when it's clear, but I even tell my students about it because they have an observing project for the planets. So hopefully they caught a few of them. But we did a show at the observatory too, but I was teaching, so I couldn't do it. So hopefully they saw a few meteors. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thank you, Bernie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And if you couldn't take notes fast enough, you can also check out the monthly What's Up column in the Portland Press Herald. So today's show was inspired by a little something called telepathy. And I guess technically telekinesis in some ways, but telepathy in quotes. And what's interesting, I'll give a little history on this. The English word for telepathy is actually a modern word for thought transference, which was coined by this man named Frederick Myers, who was a British poet and also the founder of the Society for Psychical Research that was founded in 1882. And this society, the whole purpose was to understand psychic or paranormal abilities. And the whole aim of the approach was the approach to kind of varied problems without prejudice or any prepossession of any kind. This society had actually they were inspired by the scientific method, and they had created this method and system for investigating paranormal phenomena. And they actually also founded a journal called the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research. So this society actually still exists. There's like 20 members, like 20 people who kind of run it or something. But I was trying to find some notable findings. And the only thing I could really come up with was something published in 1932. And I'm quoting here. The employment of the statistical method on large numbers of cases is entirely in the spirit of strict science. Yet, the predominantly negative results recently obtained along these lines as regards manifestations of telepathy and clairvoyance should not blind the public to the possibility of such phenomena in special cases and under special conditions. So basically, there's nothing there. And I couldn't really find anything.
Yeah.
But this society exists. There is actually one in America called the American Society for Psychical Research. I didn't look into that one too much, but because this show really isn't about telepathy, but about something a little bit more um, in our reach. And it's almost like when you hear it, it sounds like it could be telepathy or it could be telekinesis. But in reality, it works much, it's not as mysterious as that, I guess.
Hmm. There were some other so-called scientific where they did some things like they were just trying to have someone come up with certain symbols. They would put them in isolated rooms, and it didn't look like a huge difference. But for instance, they got like 32% right when they were trying to influence each other with a symbol, and just by chance they would have had about 20 or 25%. So even though it's about only about 7% difference, they said those odds like a quintillion to one that there isn't something behind that when you're actually trying to transfer your thought to another person that's not in the same room.
Yeah.
That's trying to be said. And they did these experiments many times over different people set them up. I mean, no Neuralink, nothing attached, just a regular telepathy. Now, I don't know if it's a quintillion to one or even if it's a billion to one. It seems it's not just chance.
Hmm.
So that gives a little bit of proof for that. And so I think everyone has some of these skills. And I even saw websites where you can practice those skills. I mean, the psychic part or even the telepathy part of your skills. And of course, people that so a lot of it is kind of magic. And if you can learn the magic trick, you really don't have that skill. But I think everyone has some of those skills, even if you're not trying to make somebody, recognize a symbol or something.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, interesting on that same topic.
Mm-hmm.
There, I think there were two people, and I didn't include this in my notes, but there were two people that I came across in the research who they participated in studies on, trying to um, see and kind of prove the existence of telepathy. And both of these people did something very similar where there was an object behind, a closed curtain or in another room, and they had to try to figure out what it was. And the only way that they could figure it out, though, was by maybe holding the hand of somebody who knew what was in that room. And so, how they determined, like how they figured out what was there, was based on kind of these muscle motor responses or something like that. And, both of these people kind of said themselves, like, no, I'm not, this isn't telepathy. It's nothing special. I'm just kind of able to assess based on kind of feeling how you're responding or something. So in a way, kind of similar to how like a lie detector works.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly different, but similar physiological type responses and making assessments based on that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start off with Bernie. Do you have an iPhone or Android? You have an Android.
Yeah, Android, yeah.
Do you ever use the Google Assistant at all?
No, not usually. Yeah.
Do you use the Google Translate app at all?
No, I know I've seen ads for it, but no, I don't use that.
All right.
I
So,
came across that in my research. It's really interesting how you can instant translate in real time.
yeah, that is really cool. I was even thinking at an even more basic level, but
Mhm,
your phone, I guess any phone really, you can
mhm,
press that little mic on your keyboard when you're going to type to somebody, and
mhm,
you can speak to your phone, and the phone will actually listen to what you're saying and interpret that as text, so English
yeah.
text, and it does get it right. I would say, don't quote me on this. I would say it gets it right like 95% of the time.
Oh, pretty
Very
good.
seldom do I have to go back and change something,
Hmm.
or I just kind of redo it, and it gets it the second time. So that is something that I would consider to be synthetic speech because it is just trying to, well, not quite, right? It's just interpreting what I'm saying but dictating it out into text. And I think that technology has been around for a while.
Hmm.
But in 2019, there was a paper that came out called Brain Implants That Let You Speak Your Mind. And this was the story, or this was the study that kind of when it was shared, people started to get a little worried that this was going to be a way to read your mind, to have other people read your mind. So, Dr. Edward Chang is a neurosurgeon and also the co director of the Center for Neural Engineering and Prostheses at both UC Berkeley and UCSF. And he, as a doctor, or as a surgeon actually, he treats patients with epilepsy, neuralgia, and brain tumors, but his research is focused on brain mechanisms for human speech, movement, cognition, etc. He also runs the Chang Lab, which is an experimental lab that looks at kind of circuitry and network dynamics of cortical regions to understand speech and speech disorders. And he does a lot of work in kind of mapping methods, specifically to help preserve language function during brain surgery.
Mhm.
So he talks a lot about, I think one of the most famous examples is Stephen Hawking. How did he? You're kind of familiar with how he was able to communicate, right?
Yeah. At one point,
He,
he could still move one finger, but then he couldn't even do that. So he had to
mhm.
think it, and then the computer would speak it.
Well, he didn't actually think it. I don't think anything was actually implanted or attached to his head, but essentially he had that computer,
Mhm.
right? And that kind of assistive device
Right.
allowed for visual typing.
Okay.
And so he's actually just typing
Right.
with his eyes.
Mhm.
And that generated about 10 words a minute
Mhm.
on average. Normal conversation, I learned, was is about 150 words per minute.
Oh, much
Uh,
faster.
yeah, I'm gonna after this show, I'm gonna figure out how many words per minute we average.
Okay.
To actually control speech, your brain signals are kind of coordinating over 100 muscles just to generate speech. So how do you move your tongue? How do you move your lips, jaw, your larynx, your pharynx, so your throat and everything? And the whole goal of the Dr. Chang and his team's research is to restore the natural rate of communication for those people who aren't able to due to paralysis. And so to how do you figure out what is the algorithm that gives rise to speech? So what they did is they implant electrodes into the brain and they mapped out the movements of speech. So for example, what does dad, the word dad, like what does that look
Yeah.
like for your mouth? And like every all these different words, and we can go into the linguistics of it. I actually can't, but you've got all these different sounds, and you can kind of map it out with all the different signals that light up in your brain. And so
Hmm.
they can get really precise to the millisecond, to the millimeter, and it kind of generates this electrical code used for everyday speech sounds in English, or I guess every speech sound that is available in English, which is a lot, probably more than some other languages. But then their question is, how can we use a device that then allows us to translate that into synthetic speech? So, for another comparison, typing is about 70 words per minute. And speech, I think one thing that they really like to emphasize is that we take it for granted quite a bit, because it allows us to transmit information at such a fast rate, but we don't often have to think too much about it. So what they did was they had one clinical trial. It's really hard to do mass clinical trials with this because um, in order to do this, you have to have kind of this implant of electrodes on the surface of your brain. And, I don't know how much, Bernie, you would want to
Yeah.
undergo that trial.
Yeah.
Anyway, so they have to have people who kind of already need some kind of implant and who are willing to then participate in this trial. So they had one clinical trial. It was called the Bravo clinical trial, and their patient was called Bravo 1. And basically, they implanted very small panel of like I think 128 electrodes, and that was implanted onto the surface of the brain near the motor cortex region. And this was a patient who had a stroke in the brainstem, And basically, they kind of spent a lot of hours trying to map out all of the speech and the functions and everything, and was able to have the computer algorithm decode all of that and then reproduce with synthesized speech. So I got a sample, and this is from their, um, this was provided by UCSF back in 2019 and was a part of their paper as well. And so I'm going to try to. All right. Can you hear this?
The proof that you're seeking is available in books.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
The proof that you're seeking is available in books.
The proof that you are seeking is not available in books.
Yeah.
The proof that you're seeking is available in books.
So that second, or the first and the third, were
Mhm.
the synthesized speech.
Mhm.
And that was just from this patient has this electrode, the sensor, implanted into his brain, and he is thinking how to say that sentence.
Mhm.
So he's thinking the proof you're seeking. So he's not just like thinking of the concept, he's actually thinking, how would I move my mouth to say those words? And then the algorithm is then taking those signals, translating it, and then creating that speech.
Mhm. The first part was pretty clear, but the second part I couldn't get the first time.
Here's another one.
Yeah.
She feel even the mass process.
What do you think that said?
Yeah, that's not even as clear as the first one.
All right, we'll try it again.
She feel even the mass process.
Maybe you
Can you
had a
hear some of it?
maybe she feels something or no? Not yet.
All right, here's a real one.
Shipbuilding is a most fascinating process.
Oh, shipbuilding. No, that's
She feel even the mass process.
totally different. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that is,
Mhm.
it's insane how
Mhm.
it is hard to interpret it,
Mhm.
but it is insane how close it is
Mhm.
as well. And this is just a computer going like,
Mhm.
this is the shape that you are thinking,
Mhm.
and this is what I think the sound would be based on that
Yeah.
shape that you're thinking.
Yeah.
So, anyways, this was amazing work done by Dr. Chang and his team. And again, that paper was Brain Implants That Let You Speak Your Mind.
Mhm.
Um, so, Bernie,
Yes.
the whole Elon Musk, so he's been in the news quite a bit, but he also has this other company called Neuralink that has been, they've had their highs and lows. They did have one really interesting thing that came out with the monkey, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a similar thing. I mean, obviously, we already have quite a bit of knowledge about the brain to be able to do that. He wasn't the first, as you mentioned, Dr. Chang and so on. But yeah, so the monkey was interesting. They actually taught the monkey to play a video game just with his mind. At first, he had a joystick, and then he just played it with his mind. He had two Neuralinks implanted in his brain. So maybe you needed two to like the stereo, and they had to reward him with a banana shake or something in between or something like that. But and it was a very basic game, Pong. I mean, I remember playing that in college in the '70s. So it wasn't some great video game with all the other things, even though it would have applications for that too for humans in the future. But the fact that the monkey could play a video game with just his mind and not even a joystick gets pretty amazing.
Is it the same concept that they're implanting something, a chip in the brain?
Yeah, yeah. That he actually had two chips, like I said, because they did it with pigs too, and there was a pig with one chip, and they had a sound version of the pig snuffling around, in the little pen, and you could see in the little graph version, and you could hear kind of the input that the pig was getting when they were snuffling around there with the Neuralink.
So I guess that's really interesting because one of the things that the study that I was just talking about,
Mhm.
the whole, in order for that to be successful, you would need to know how to speak.
Yeah.
And these, And so that's the only reason why it worked. Like you can't just think of something and the computer can you expect that the computer can interpret it. It's not quite that advanced. And then but for this monkey, did they already know how to play Pong? Like how did they
Yeah,
teach
that's a
it?
good point. I don't know. I just watched a couple of videos on it, and I didn't get all the details of how it was set up.
Hmm.
I think it was a while ago. I mean, the pigs were like over a year ago. I think the monkey's a little bit more recent.
Yeah.
I mean, they
Well,
might already have more advanced versions of it and everything.
yeah.
Yeah. Of course, the reason is to do things like cure epilepsy or strokes and so on, but it can also lead to a lot of other things like completely, eventually, I mean, not right away, downloading all your memories and thoughts. I mean, you're
Mhm.
becoming much more connected to AI. We are kind of now already with computers and cell phones and everything, but that'll be much more direct. And it could work both ways to help us and see what we're thinking, but then they could eventually maybe implant things, thoughts and things too, which would be that maybe not as good. He says about 10 years. It'll probably be a lot longer than that. And they have to do a lot more versions and iterations of it to have it be able to do more advanced things like that. But all these things science fiction writers write about, I mean, that could all happen within our lifetimes, 15 years tops, even if it's 20. Elon always cuts everything shorter, like going to Mars and, everything is just a few years down the road for him. But just the fact that he's doing that and we're learning so much, I mean, it has a lot of good uses, of course, that we can do. And even like just video games, it'll make it so much quicker. There won't be any more latency. I mean, you think you're doing great in a video game now with the VR, virtual reality. You can be doing 1,000 times more realistic video games with that, because that's not a whole purpose for Neuralink, but that will be one additional thing it can do.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, speaking of kind of going back to your point earlier, there are suggestions that schools may be obsolete because like learning will be transformed because you could just download everything. Like
Yeah,
you could actually literally download everything
yeah.
to that chip and then into your brain.
Yeah, exactly. You have complete access to everything on the internet immediately. Then you can do the augmented reality part, even just some glasses, even if you don't need
Hmm.
glasses. Anything like what a good example is you can go to the Roman Colosseum if you visit Rome and you can
Hmm.
see an actual gladiator fight from 2,000 years ago. And you can see it now, and then you could do something else the next minute or whatever. All that's going to be there because your mind is already
Yeah.
so much quicker than anything you're seeing anyway, or even it's almost like a Rosetta Stone for learning to convey all your thoughts immediately. I mean, I think Elon Musk brought up that, and really like being in the Matrix or something like that, all the possibilities. And then, of course, Joe Rogan brought up the fact that how do we know we're not in a simulation now with a matrix of a much higher intelligence that's already doing all this to us as it is, and that's certainly a possibility. Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about that. All the top scientists do. We'll have instant access to all the knowledge that humans have. It doesn't mean we'll really know things beyond that with the Neuralink, but at least we'll know everything. That would certainly change education, like you said.
Right. Yeah, and I do wonder how that impacts us because I mean, learning is also like a key component of learning is the creation of memories related to that learning. And that helps with kind of access and recall and things like that. Whereas if everything was just downloaded,
Yeah,
what would that really look like as far as, you know, finding that information and putting that information to use, like making connections with that information?
yeah. I mean, memories can be faulty, of course, as you know, from crime things
Mm-hmm.
and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And you would go beyond, way beyond memories, or you could download all your memories, or you could go and visit yourself 10 years in the past, or I suppose you could even visit yourself 10 years in the future,
Hmm.
and all these amazing things. So yeah, I mean, I think it could go way beyond memories and just the current knowledge of humans, even.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So a couple more interesting things on the same topic of computer brain interfaces.
Okay.
There is another well, it's not a company, it's a group right now, and they're actually called BrainGate. Dr. Jamie Henderson, who is a Stanford neurosurgeon and the co-director of the Stanford Neuroprosthetics Translational Laboratory. So, and kind of similar to Dr. Edward Chang. They published in 2021, this year, an article, High Performance Brain to Text Communication via Handwriting. And it works very similarly to Dr. Chang's work, but essentially they use electrodes implanted over the motor cortex of the brain, which again is the area that controls movement. And they ask the patient to imagine that you are holding a pen over a piece of paper, and the machine can actually help decode every letter of the alphabet. And so then it can decode what the letters are, interpret the sentences at about 95% accuracy, and gives the person trying to communicate about 90 words per minute, which seems kind of fast. I don't know how fast I write per minute, but 90 words is faster than typing, apparently.
Yeah, 60 is a good rate for typing. Some people
Yeah.
can do 100, but 60 is a good rate. Most people are probably more like 30.
Yeah. But I guess maybe thinking about the letters is much faster than actually having to write them.
Yeah.
So that was just another really interesting one, and may be actually easier. They had a higher percent of accuracy than the speech one, which was I think around 70-ish. But anyways, easier, less just less things going on because there's only so many letters, and way more kind of ways of speaking and all the little nuances of language. And then the last thing that I also wanted to mention was there's also a group called Neurolife, which works by what they do is they bypass damaged areas of an individual's nervous system and try to communicate directly with the muscles in the paralyzed limb. And so a team of surgeons basically implanted a minute chip, which is a 4x4 millimeter chip, into, again, the motor cortex area of the brain. And the chip can pick up electrical signals from the brain and transmit that data to a computer, which, again, decodes the signal, and then the information is then passed on to, there's a bunch of electrodes that are then wrapped around the arm, which is kind of where the muscles are that control your hand movements. And basically they have the participant think, try to pick up a pen, or try to pour this, or just try to grab this. And it takes a lot of practice, because for you and I to think about using our hand, we don't really have to think about it.
Yeah.
But to actually have to, okay, I'm going to lift my pointer finger, or I'm going to do all this. So anyways, it has kind of seen some positive things. The guy was trying to play like Battleship, and he was pouring things, and this was a hand that he could no longer use and hadn't been able to use for a very long time. And then they're kind of working on this special sleeve that will allow this to be portable as well. So very cool things working in or that are happening in this area.
Yeah, the whole future of that. I mean, even if it is more than 10 years, all the things we'll be able to do within 20 years of this. I mean, it's almost like the old way of learning now will be like the campfire type thing. We can still make one if we want to, but we'll be able to learn 1,000 times faster, and basically almost like become immortal, because you could just download everything that you thought was you into a future like cyborg type. I mean, we're almost in some version of a cyborg already, but it'll be way more advanced than that. So there's really no limit to the possibilities of these type of things, the AI and the deep learning and some of the other things we've talked about with direct contact with the brain and motion. Of course, there's always two sides of everything too, but you could completely hack, or take over humans and hack into them and everything else too. Then
Yep.
when it happens, yeah. But for the most part, it should be good. We're responsible enough to use it that way and to help people and communicate instantly with anyone in the world. And the next step with other civilizations, even in other places and so on, would be the next step, of course.
Yeah, I can imagine some of the, I don't know, being able to maybe hear things that you don't want to hear. Like that's when things go wrong. But who knows?
It happened.
You have been listening to Scientifically Speaking here on WMPG with myself and Bernie. Stay tuned for Disco Jams with Jam Lewis, and from your favorite nerds, reminder to vaccinate, mitigate, and then we can all congregate.